Wahlmanipulationen,
interference with election, disinformation, intimidation. Ladies and gentlemen, Europe is currently facing problems we could not have imagined years ago. But the Commission is reacting. There is an action plan for our European democracy. And this is the topic we want to discuss today at our event in Brussels. A warm welcome to you all. Maybe you have seen a video recently. Somebody got a vaccine and suddenly became a monkey. Is disinformation something we have to get used to? Is this a danger for our democracies? Is this something we can avoid and tackle? So, once again, a warm welcome to all of you. And I would like to give you some information. We have a German and English channel, so you can follow us in German and English. We only have 45 minutes, so without any further ado, I would like to give the word to Lucia Puttrich, the Minister for Federal and European Affairs of the State of Hessen, for her welcoming speech. Dear Miss Nicolai, dear Miss Wettach, dear ladies and gentlemen, living in a democracy is a kind of privilege. We can speak our mind openly, we have free elections, and if we do not agree with something, we can demonstrate against it. We don't have fear of despotism or violence. Democracy is more than just an economic organization. It's a kind of way of life. Worldwide, only about 6% of the population are living in a democratic system like the one in Germany. So, living in a democracy is nothing we can take for granted. And therefore, we have to do our utmost to defend our democracy, our way of life. Pressure on our democratic system is increasing, internal pressure and external pressure. One example, disinformation campaigns aiming at destabilizing our democracy. Until now, the EU has mainly banked on self-regulation in order to tackle this problem. A naive approach? Do we need to get tougher? Do we need to increase the social media's responsibility? Do we need a new European legal framework? I really appreciate the fact that the European Commission answers all these questions in the new strategy for the protection of our European democracies. The action plan, European Democracy, comes at the right time. And our event today is dedicated to this action plan. A warm welcome to all of you. What characterizes disinformation? What makes them different from simply wrong information? Of course, we all can be wrong and disseminate incorrect information. That is not the topic here. Our topic concerns targeted misinformation aiming at manipulating and destabilizing our society. Very often, these campaigns take place with the support of the financing of third countries. Disinformation can reach our democracy in its very heart, can reach our free and self-determined elections. The European elections 2019 clearly showed, thanks to the comprehensive measures taken by the Member States and the EU Commission, there was no far-reaching manipulation, but there were different attempts in order to interfere. Let me take one example. In Spain, during these European elections, a coordinated net of Twitter accounts could be unmasked. By means of a mix of posts, spots and fake profiles, it promoted anti-Islamist propaganda in order to strengthen the Spanish right-wing populist party Vox. During the European elections, Vox reached a 6%. And similar incidents took place in Austria, Poland, Romania, Latvia, Italy, France, and the United Kingdom. And until now, the European Commission has mainly banked on self-regulation by the respective social media. And the Code of Conduct Against Disinformation from 2018 was the first important step in the right direction, but it's not enough. We have to do more in Europe. We are not being naive. We are determined. And we want to take the right approach. We want to protect our freedom of speech, and self-regulation is a very important instrument. But we need a clear legal framework in order to implement this. This is a really demanding task for the European legislator. I am very pleased to welcome Renate Nikolay, head of cabinet of our Vice President Věra Jourová. Silke Wettach will be the moderator of this talk, and she's working at the German Wirtschaftswoche. I wish you a very interesting discussion, and I wish you to stay safe.
I'm extremely pleased to welcome Renate Nikolay. We have the necessary distance between us, but it's such a pleasure to be here with you live today. Renate Nikolay, for those of you who do not know it, is Vice President of Commissioner Vera Jourová, who is in charge of fundamental rights and also the topic we discuss here today. She's also in charge of values and transparency. I thank you for being here today. Is it really such a bad situation for the European democracy that we need such an action plan right now? Well, I think it's high time for Europe to say a clear yes for European democracy in this current situation. And especially to recognize that there are problems, to acknowledge these. The action plan doesn't come from nowhere. It is rather taking stock and tackling a situation where we see that there's a lot of extremism, populism, online in particular, a situation in Europe that also shows that there are lots of attacks against journalists, whether it be online or in real life, physically. And we see a lot of disinformation campaign of a manipulative type, which try to impact our elections and the decision processes in general. And I think the action plan here says we have acknowledged the problem and now we're taking action. Great. And for those who are listening in, you have the possibility to ask questions. I'm not the only one who is able to pose questions to Mrs. Nicolai. You can put them in German, in English. As you have seen, there is a hotline, so you can call, but you can also send an email. You can reach us either way, and we're actually really happy that this is an interactive event and a living debate. I think for some it might be really strange thinking that we're sitting here and talking about democracy, whereas the digital package is so important nowadays. But there is a link. Please explain to us. Yes, today indeed is a very important day for Europe because we are regulating the digital aspect. It is such an important day, as it already has been in the past with other big regulation aspects, such as, for example, with the data protection one. And today, the Digital Market Act is going to be presented by the responsible commissioners in short, and will actually open the door for a new chapter in this area. And that's really high time, because at the moment we are basing all our actions on a legislative act which has been there for 20 years, and that is far outdated. We have now collected valuable experience together with the platforms, etc. But the situation clearly shows that if we want to protect both our society and ensure fair play in our markets, then we need to build upon this experience. with self-regulation, of course, as well, with this experience, and put it into regulation, step into regulation. It's quite a pioneer task there, such as in the past with data protection. Europe is taking the lead here, but these are projects that have been discussed in depth, and they are also being finalized right now with the commissioners, and I think it's a moment that we have been really waiting for. Both the stakeholders and the Parliament and the Council are really open to jump into this process, into this debate. And this action plan also has a digital area, because disinformation, of course, is also a digital topic. There is disinformation also offline, but the one which is most worrying to us is the online one, because, of course, the methods allow us to amplify this disinformation. You can reach millions of people in shortly just through the digital platforms, and this can lead to really big problems in controversial debates. And I would like to say that what we are doing today, what we are creating today in the European Commission is the basic, the foundation, and the act will be the horizontal framework around it, which will allow us to have clearer rules for everybody, better observation, also the possibility of taking sanctions. But on the other hand, when we're dealing with specific problems, such as, for example, illegal content, terrorist content, or disinformation, which is not illegal, but which is a problem and can pose a threat to society, then we need really specific measures, and the action plan for the democracy will allow these specific rules. So they are actually working together. There we have the horizontal layer, and then we have the very specific formulations which complement them, such as through this action plan now. Thank you. And does this mean that the softer approach has not had success? Well, I wouldn't say it that way. At the moment, I was working for Věra Jourová for justice, and in the midst of the crisis, of the refugee crisis, there was a really radicalization online, which posed a big problem. And we were talking very openly together with the ministers of justice. One example, for example, was a network. It was a law for Germany which went where the national approach was preferred. But in another area, they were really supportive when we said we need self-regulation and we need a codex, we need a code of conduct on such a self-regulation approach. And they said, well, why should we do that? Because we're not actually dealing, the platform said, we're not dealing with the content. We're not responsible for the content. We're just the framework. And this is over. Now we're really engaging in a very close cooperation with the platforms, both as far as this code of conduct is confirmed, and later also as far as the code of practice for disinformation is concerned. So we are now in a transformative area with when at the beginning nobody actually knew what can we do, what is right, what do we need. We need to make sure that the freedom of expression is conserved. And I think we really had good results because hatred in the network was well taken care of. In 2016, we started with 28% of illegal content of that order, which was taken off from the network in less than 24 hours. And now we have 80%, which is really great. We don't want to have 100% because that would be over-compliance. And then, of course, we would limit also, we would be in this field of limitation of the freedom of expression. But the moment has come that we need certainty, both for the economy and for the citizens. Could you please explain where exactly you see this limit? Well, as far as disinformation is concerned, we want a new pact for disinformation. This means that we're going away from self-regulation, where everything was just monitored and where this monitoring was left over to the platforms in cooperation together with us, and we go to co-regulation. So in the future, the Digital Services Act will offer us a monitoring instrument, which is also inspired by data protection. So there is a decentralized structure that will at the same time also offer concrete European structures that are built upon it. But this will be presented later on by the responsibles. But this monitoring structure will offer us the possibility to make sure that the self-regulatory or self-responsibility responsibility codex will be observed. But of course, we also have to take care of something else. Last summer, there was the assessment that was published, which showed clearly that we had still something to be cleared in cooperation with fact-checkers, in data transmission, transparency with algorithms, etc. And this is where we need to do more. The new pact will be therefore more specific. It will also be more specific in the responsibility for the platform. And I think this will be a very useful instrument in the fight against disinformation. Very often censorship is criticized. What do you do about that? This is why it's so important. There is no one-size-fits-all. Those who have thought that the Digital Services Act is the solution for all the problems internet, we have to say no, that would be too easy. It's important that we make clear that Europe is clearly against illegal content, that they will be sanctioned, taken off, that this is a monitoring system, and it's important. But when we're in the area of disinformation, we're in this very difficult area between accepting opinion, because this is what our European society is based upon, and on the other side, we also have the political discourse, but at the same time making sure that the citizen has the possibility to see the greater picture, and this is where we have to be very careful. How can we make sure that there are no echo chambers, for example, where just some are communicating amongst each other, and how do you avoid this? We have some concrete initiatives, and which we have announced, and one of them, a very important one, which takes us already into the protection of integrity of elections, will be, and we haven't yet done it, it will be in the third quarter of next year, there will be a legislative initiative that we are going to present concerning more transparency in political advertising or politically sponsored content. This is a very big thing. And there is intellectual preparation work that we need to do, but this would mean that big scandals like Cambridge Analytica wouldn't be happening anymore, because this will show, and you will see that in the Digital Services Act, general transparency for advertising will be incorporated, which is important because that is the horizontal main regulation. But when we are in an election campaign where we know that this is not just taking place offline, but that it's actually taking place online, and that our regulations, our rules have been stuck in the offline world, then we need to skip in there. And there will be one particular of these loopholes that we will tackle in election campaigns. Micro-targeting is allowed. This is one of the questions, or not. That's a very difficult debate. Another topic, for example, what is included in such a legislative initiative? Is it just the politically sponsored advertising campaign of a particular party, of a candidate? What do we do with the so-called issues ads, which are actually pre-shown, so shown before the election campaign itself, but which are targeted to deepen controversial debates in society? Can we make a differentiation there? This is really a lot of work on an intellectual level, but there are many also from a scientific level which are working on that, and with whom we have been in contact to develop this action plan. We have also decided to tackle this topic. It is an important topic to make sure that elections are more fairer, and this is also a topic that we need to make sure that in the digital world we can ensure living democracy without threats.
There is the topic regarding electoral campaigns and elections. As a regulator, what can we do? Everybody is retiring in its tiny chambers on the internet. So I'm on Instagram and I'm taking a yoga class, and yoga to conspiracy theories, it's not a huge step. Is there something we can do? Yes, I think we can do something. But this is not about prohibiting all these echo cameras. I think we need to increase our attention as in our role as a regulator. Okay. At what time these kind of echo chambers can be difficult, and we need to increase our capacities of analysis. Okay, you have taken the example of the vaccine and the monkey. Currently, we are being in a campaign against a vaccine against COVID-19, and here we need to react. But finally, we need an intelligent society being critical regarding the media, okay? And this is really a generational task, and our action plan is also talking about this. I think we need all of these approach. I think there are dangerous moments for this echo chamber that can really have a very negative impact, close to illegality and undermining our democracy. There we have to act. But on the other hand, we do not want to lose the open internet where people can get together, celebrate things together. This is our difficult balancing act. And this is not something we can do overnight, but this will be a very long process. You have been talking about the responsibility of the different companies. How do these companies react? I don't know how they will react to this big step, but this remains to be seen. I think we are part of all of this. This is what I want to illustrate here. It's really a big step of the European Commission regarding the digitization. And the only thing I can say is that we are part of the topic. If we want to act regarding disinformation, we have to take into account the three aspects. We have to take into account the sources of this information. There we really have to indicate where this information can come from. It can be with the aim of manipulating political motivation, and then we have the different channels. And third point regards advertising and so on. And third point, this is the population. These are the different targets. So, and during this process, or in order to tackle the disinformation in a more efficient way, we have to tackle the 3 points, okay? Therefore, platforms and cooperation partners remain very important. And finally, I think it's a very difficult role, and they are ready to give away a little part of self-regulating. And I think it's really important to have clear rules for Europe. We have been talking about elections, about freedom of speech, of freedom of expression, freedom of the press. Okay, so then we had some different cases in Slovakia and so on. Could we do something from Brussels? Could you guarantee more security to journalists? So, of course, we have to do everything which is in our power in order to support the plurality of media. It's the first time in a commission that a vice president has the task to implement a coordinated media policy. And we see that this makes sense. There is a need in Europe and a call to talk about the different media topics. You are talking about the politically motivated murder in Europe. Who would have been thinking that we would have to talk about this? Then I have been talking about the physical and online attacks journalists always have to face. But then we have even larger phenomena. We have the first report on legal rule of law voted to month ago, and there we have taken into account the media plurality of every state. We have been talking about media concentration, national advertising, and this is something we can find back in different different member states. And these are topics we have to tackle, since media are a kind of very important role in a liberal democracy. And if we want a society that is critical regarding the media, we have to support this all. And also part of the action plan, the concrete initiatives is to work more on the security of journalists. I think Europe can do even more, and there we want to work on a recommendation. This could be practical things like European hotlines for journalists. So really, there we want to promote this topic at the political agenda in order to improve the situation. Another topic is really a very old topic we have been discussing for years now. It's the right to speak up against journalism, okay? It's the same thing like regarding the whistleblowers. We need a common standard regarding these processes. And this is something we will be working on during the next year. And the topic of media, freedom of media and plurality of media in the European Union needs more attention. Okay, we have been talking about media concentration. In Poland, we have the case of a company close to the state that bought many smaller journals and newspapers. And of course, we are rapidly thinking about Poland and Hungary. But I was looking at a ranking yesterday, and France was like behind Ghana and whatever on the 34th place. So what is the magnitude of this problem, and what can we do against this kind of acquisition? Of course, our competence is limited regarding media politics. Therefore, we have to look around and to try to find out where we can act. Then we have one possibility to act at the level of criminal law. Then we need also to act at the competition law, and we are talking currently with the Vice President Vestager. Then we have the Hungarian case that the Commission is currently working on. So for the moment, it's not very easy. There are kind of thresholds to be respected, okay? But I think this year, and for a decade now, we have the Media Pluralism Monitor examining the situation in the different countries. And this is not a very positive evaluation. So not everything is very positive in Europe. And I think now we have our European Democracy Action Plan, and it's the first time that we can try to tackle the different aspects that might put a danger to the European democracies. It's one plan, and this plan gives us the possibility to continue and to deepen our discussion. And the first discussion at the European Council and at the Parliament, the first reactions are very positive in all of these areas. And therefore, I am convinced, even it's a limited competence of the European Union, it's really a potential area of further cooperation. Okay, very interesting. So you really have to try to put together the different instruments, and this is not something new. So you are talking about competition law, which might be or give some hope. I think competition law is very important, and I hope that our next multi-annual financial framework will become reality soon, where we also find concrete supporting projects. Okay, of course, the Commission cannot support different companies, but there we can do some use some specific channels. Okay, and our program offers much more possibilities now. And the day we voted the European Democracy Action Plan, we have also voted the Audiovisual Industry Action Plan, and this was not a coincidence, since both approaches need to be combined. And the media sector is in a transformation, also due to the digital transformation, and it's a sector which was negatively impacted by the COVID crisis. Therefore, it's not only about talking about the role of media for democracy, but we also wanted to make a clear offer of how Europe can support the media by a transformation process, but also by supporting programs. Okay, as you said, the reaction was very positive. So for me, as a member state, it's very easy to say, okay, great, action plans, okay, and the things will only become difficult when you have concrete proposals on the table. So how do I have to imagine this? No, let's take Slovenia. We have a prime minister celebrating the fact that Trump would again be the next US president. So even if things were clear, can you count on the support of this kind of countries? Yeah, currently we are having intensive talks regarding this topic with Slovenia. So one must not draw conclusions from one statement. Okay, the membership in the European Union is very heterogeneous, but last week has shown that we are able to act. And I think our action plan is about the trio in Article 2. It's the fundamental laws, democracy and rule of law. And we have to tackle the different problems, the different situations in the different member states. If we don't do this, we cannot count on our mutual confidence, and this will make long-term objectives like our single market very difficult. And of course, these are very difficult topics and embarrassing topics, but finally, Europe has to work on this in order to make advance and continue the European project. Regarding disinformation, I could really see how this topic is becoming increasingly important among the Commission and among the member states. Now, we had a communication regarding COVID-19 specific misinformation, and this was a really welcomed statement asked for by the European Council. And the European Council is saying now that we really have to tackle the disinformation regarding the vaccine. And of course, if we do this together, we will be stronger. If we regard our capacity of analysis, okay, disinformation has a whole lot of impact, okay? It can be just by coincidence, or it can really be a strategy. And we have been naming states behind this, okay? And of course, we have to use the diversity and the expertise of the member states in order to react, in order to develop better tools, in order to make things tougher for the manipulators, okay? So maybe we should think about sanctions in the future. I think Europe is really ready to work together.
You have already indicated very softly that there's also the rule of law. When you mentioned the Council last week, there was a big success, apparently, after a long period of blockage, but there was also critical voices. There were critical voices. People said, yes, it was improved a lot, but not enough. Is this critical voice legitimate? Well, you must see that I'm sort of in the machine room, in the technical equipment part, and I have to be very careful. I would say that 2020 was a big year of success for Europe. Because on the one hand, for the first time, we had a rule of law report that was presented and that has a very broad approach considering the situation in all member states. And it is part of this very broad approach that you have to fight against corruption, justice systems, checks and balances, the media system. Many or some member states always said, well, you are just looking at us but not on others. But there we have proven that we're using the same method for all of them. And this, amongst others, made that in the General Council we could have a first debate on the first member states in alphabetical order. Denmark, amongst others, and who would have thought that in the year of 2020 there would be a debate on the rule of law in Denmark in the European Council. I think it's a very important process that this culture of the rule of law that we have in Europe is confirmed. But the success story last week was just as important, because who would have thought when the European Commission included it in its draft in 2018 that the next MFR, and not just this one, but also the next generation EU, would be linked to the rule of law, and that the conditioning of rule of law would be coming in. And this was really a compromise last week. What was important for me is that the result of the trilogue was not touched. We didn't modify the least bit, neither for the criteria nor for the preconditions, and I think it was really done in a really wonderful manner, facilitated in a wonderful manner by the German presidency. And this is a really big project that will be helpful for us in its tools that we will be using, dealing with very, very carefully. And of course, we're waiting for a measure that will also depend on the decision by the Court of Justice, which leads us to the compromise that we obtained. And I think this is important because a very first case will always have to be carefully dealt with and prepared. We have to create new structures to be able to deal with the criteria, to be able to place them. Of course, this will need months of preparation, and the procedure within the European Court of Justice will be a fast one. And to say it with the words of my Vice President, we're talking about months here and not years. It's a broadening of the toolbox within the debate of rule of law that we needed in Europe, and it is also an intimate wish of the European people, the citizens, because latest polls, latest surveys showed that even in countries such as Hungary, over 70% of the population thought that if Europe is dealing with so much money, that we will have to make sure that the rule of law is granted. As soon as it will be possible to use this, to make use of this, do you think there will be a first case? Well, I can't promise what will happen. I think we will see what is going to happen. I do believe in the normative power of law as a signal and an alarm signal, and I hope that if we manage to bring this into place, several things will change in the terms they are organized, and maybe there will be less material. Monitoring, of course, we will deal with this right from the start, but what I can say is that the European Commission will create its guidelines, that the monitoring will happen, and then we will see. To ask it the other way around, don't you even need a case so that it is credible? Well, I think it's already very credible, and it gives us legitimacy that we put it in. I think in terms of rule of law, you have to sometimes take a step back. There's a lot of difficulties. There were many procedures of infringement procedures, and there are so many topics in Europe where we would never have thought that we would discuss them in such an intensive manner. But it is important because this is all about mutual confidence, mutual trust in our common market. But we needed to create new possibilities, both in the area of prevention, so that we could talk about things early enough, also in cooperation, just like with the rule of law report, but also in the repressive area, to have a reply, an efficient reply. And this is where we need the mechanism in the next budget. Do you think that this leads to a change of paradigm, or has led to a change in the vision of countries such as Hungary, or is it just all about the money and they said, oh yeah, when we don't do anything then we don't get money? I think it was a moment of truth for Europe last week. It was not just about Hungary and Poland who tried to put in their veto. It was also on the other side there were countries as well that would not have been able to say yes were it not for the rule of law principles. So we're really aware of the fact that European citizens and companies need the security of economic money, of the security of the financial framework for the next multi-annual financial framework. But at the same time, we needed to make very clear that we have values and that in the best interest of European citizens and taxpayers, we are making good use of the money. Thank you. This leads us to the questions. We have been sent a question by Mr. Thomas Mann, a former member of the European Parliament of Hessen, and Mr. Mann would like to know, is there cooperation between the European Commission and the European Parliament Special Committee on Foreign Interference in all democratic processes in the European Union, including disinformation? And is the Commission ready to create black and grey lists for internet platforms that proclaim responsibility in the fight against contents that threaten democracy, but do not sufficiently comply with them? Well, the first question, the first thing that my vice president did when the action plan was presented was that she went to the special committee and presented it there. And there was a lot of support for our proposal. Grey lists, blacklists? Well, look at what would happen if the Digital Services Act and the Digital Market Act were presented. I think in those, it is all about creating more responsibility for platforms in all areas, whether it be fair competition, transparency, cooperation with fact-checkers. And we need to put this on a higher level, higher quality level. So this would mean that this means that we are more ambitious now in these. I do believe that there are no questions. No further questions. I would like to ask, with a view to the elections in crisis times, well, personally, I was wondering, do you think we will ever go back to times where there is no critical situation? We have come out of a period with masks around the COVID crisis. Now it's all about the vaccine. We will have to deal with the economic regression. So economical crisis will be one of the expressions that we'll have to deal with. Do you think that we will ever come out of this general tension and pressure again? It's not about stopping the topic of disinformation. It has always been part of our life. Propaganda, lies, they are all part of our life. We need to make sure that the most dangerous phenomena that are dangerous for our population are better addressed. And this means that in such a very delicate time, like an electoral campaign, just before the voting takes place, in offline, for example, in the offline area, there should be silence periods. How can I make sure that fairness in political discussion and others, how can I bring them from offline to online? How can I make sure that they are transferred from offline to online reality? And I think this is what our legislative initiative has to deal with concerning political advertising. And we need to make a difference between general lifespans and the time period just before the voting is taking place. Of course, in periods such as the pandemic or recession, of course, there will always be disinformation campaigns. We have started with these after the Cambridge Analytica Facebook story, and we have been really, really careful and very worried before the last election. We have been very carefully constructing, building up the measures around it. But I do think that manipulators also have learned. We can see that there's more and more campaigning taking place within the European Union and not only from the outside, which means that our capacity to analyze needs to move on as well and needs to further develop with the campaigners. Russia, for example, in its external policy measures, has mentioned disinformation campaign as a tool, as a public tool. But this is just one phenomenon. It's not what we're talking about today. There's entire science concerning disinformation. This will remain a very dynamic process where we will always have to be careful and make sure that we are adaptive, flexible, can adapt to the risks that are changing as well. It's a phenomenon to see that disinformation can spring over to the population. It's not new, it's just now different than before, because with just one click it springs over to so many people, and we didn't know that before. Thank you. I think it's very important that you mentioned this radical speeding up of the process. I think we cannot ever say this too often. Personally, I met Daphne just a few months before her death in Malta, and she told me that there were threats and physical aggressions. Well, her house was actually threatened with being burned off. And I think this is a true problem. So I could imagine that we should continue our debate. Maybe you could come back over time so that we talk about, so that we deepen our debate. I would also like to say thank you to the interpreters we had with us today, even though they're not in the room and you cannot see them, but they made it possible that you could listen to our debate in English. I thank you very much for your time, and I thank you all for your interest. Thank you for being here today.